In this guide, we are going to talk about Ruby modules and how we can build out our own Ruby modules. And I'm also going to walk through a real-world case study for where modules can be placed inside of a production application. So if you are brand new to modules, you've never seen the syntax, or maybe you've never worked with them in an application, or maybe you're just trying to learn what they're all about, one of the best ways that I've found for learning about modules is to start with classes in Ruby. So I've written right here, a basic sale class. So with a sale class, we have defined it as class sale, and then we've initialized the sale with a initialize method here. We've taken in some params data, we've stored those params in an instance variable, and then inside of the method we have a call method that is printing out whatever params that we're passing to it. Now to call that class, or to call this call method, we instantiate the sale class just like we do here on line 11. And then on line 12, we take that object we've created, that sale object, and then we are able to make the call method on it. And if we call this, then we can see it prints out exactly like what we'd expect. It says params in the class, and we passed in the class params. And so this data could be anything we want. This could just be, some data, just like this. And then if we run this, you can see that that data is what gets printed out. And this is a very standard Ruby class. So how does a module fit in? A module looks a lot like a Ruby class, but it has some different use cases. So a class gives you the ability to take in data, to work with that data, and merge data in with various methods. And so a class is a pretty comprehensive blueprint for how data can work, data with methods. Now a module is a little bit different. A module still gives you some of that ability. You can definitely take data in, and then you can work with that data. You can combine it with other methods, but a module's real purpose is providing utility. A module is usually used when you want to create some type of a helper function, a helper process that you can simply have a one-line module that you can call that is going to do some process for you. Now I'm going to show you an example of this in a real-world application that I have, just to give you an idea of why you might want to use a module, and then we're going to see how we can build in modules in a real way with a kind of our own syntax. So here I have a very large Rails application, and inside of this Rails application I have a set of services. These are simply a set of classes, and if you open up the services directory, you can see that it is pretty massive. So what I am currently in the middle of doing, it's kind of what inspired me to create this video, is each one of these modules is its own Ruby class, but this application has gotten a lot bigger than we originally thought it was going to be. And so because of that, what I am now starting to do is I'm starting to break up and organize this service directory, and I'm using modules to do it. So right now, instead of having each one of the service files to have its own class, and essentially this service directory is a set of Ruby files, and each one of the files has its own class, that can get a little bit messy. So where modules can come in to help is, if you come up here, we have a revenue reports manager directory. So what I am doing right now is inside of the services directory, I am leveraging modules to be able to organize and namespace the code. So now I have this module called Revenue Reports Manager. Inside of there, I have a nested module called campaigns service. And then I have classes and I have all of my data and my behavior inside of that. So this is a very standard use case for how you would want to work with a module. So now that you've seen that, let's actually build our own. And I'm going to start by mimicking what we have here with our sale. I'm going to comment this out because we can't have the same name of a class and a module in the same file. And so I'm going to create a sale module here. And to start off, I'm going to give it the identical behavior that our class had. So in order to do that, I'm going to say module, the name of the module, and you want to capitalize your module name, and then have a end block here. So everything inside of this from line 14 to 16 is going to be our module. Now I can create a call method just like we had in our class. I don't need an initializer. All I have to do is say def self dot call, and then I can take in the params just like this. And then just so we can have this be completely identical, I'm just going to copy this put statement. And then this is going to be params in module. Now to call this, I don't have to instantiate the module because a module is not a class. We are not creating a class-based object with our module. When you work with modules, you simply call it and you have it perform its data, or its behavior. It's all you need to do. So to call it, I can say sale dot call and then pass in any params that I want. So here I'm going to do the same thing. I'll say some data. And that's all I need to do. And now if I run this code, you'll see that, it's actually, and I copy, whenever you copy and paste, sometimes this happens. We're not using an instance variable, we're just using the name params. Okay, there we go. Now let's run it, and there we go. We have some data, and that's exactly the behavior that we had up here. So in what took us 12 lines of code to write, we were able to cut that almost in half. Now, this type of module setup, it's not a replacement for a class whatsoever, because modules can't perform all of the same behavior that a class can perform. If you look at a Rails application, classes are used for all kinds of very important tasks, such as being the kind of the blueprint for how a database table works, or for how the controller, the data controllers can take in data from routes and then they can pass that data to views. There's a lot of very important things that classes are needed for. Classes can be very extensive in terms of what they can do and what they can offer your application. However, if you simply need a helper utility, so if you just want to have some basic behavior that you want to wrap up some methods and some data with, a module can do that. So let's take this a little step further. So right now we have the sale module, but if we want to mimic what I have been building out here in this Rails application, you might wonder, how can we have these nested modules? Well, that is pretty straightforward in terms of how you can structure that. So I'm going to clear out everything that's running here. And so let's say inside of this sale module, I want to do something like have a form builder. So this is where I could take in form data and then I can wrap that up and do things like calculations with it. So I have this form builder module here. Now I can do the exact same thing, that I can call it exactly the same way, but now I've added another namespace. So the way that you can call nested modules is by saying sale and then 2 colons and then the name of the nested module, just like this. And now if we want to call this, it's being called exactly the same way. So that's how you can nest modules with each other. So that is pretty much everything you need to know in terms of your basic syntax for modules, along with the ability to have nested modules. Now, the last thing that I want to work with is how you can actually have multiple methods inside of your modules. So right now we have this call method, but what if I want the call method to perform multiple tasks? It wouldn't be good to load up hundreds and hundreds of lines of code inside of this call task. So what I can do is I can actually wrap up this entire call class with or call method with its own class. Now this is going to look a little bit weird if you've never done this before, but just kind of follow along, and once you have worked with this a few times, it'll start to make sense. I'm going to create a class that doesn't actually have any name at all. So I'm going to create a class here, and I'm simply going to pass in self to the class. So this is going to be a little bit different than working with a standard class. So we're not going to really work with initializers. We're not going to, as you can see, we're not going to have a name, a dedicated name to the class. We are doing it much different than we did, say, on line 1 up here. So we're simply passing self, which means that when we call Sail Form Builder, then it's going to have access to this class. It's going to instantly instantiate and create this object for us, and then we can call these methods. Now the helpful thing about this is because we've wrapped this class up, we can add other methods. So I can even add an entire private set of methods here, because these are going to be methods that only this specific form builder module and nested class is going to use. So say that I want to have a method here called tax rate. So this is going to take in a state name, and then depending on the state name, it's going to return a different rate. So here I'm going to say state name. So if state name is equal to Arizona, then I want to return 0.65 as the tax rate. Else, if the state is California, then we're going to have a little bit higher tax rate. So here it's going to be 0.087. Now what this call method can do is this call method can take in all of the params, and then it can actually call this tax rate method. So say if the goal of the form builder is to take in a subtotal and a state name and then perform a calculation with that, let's see what that would look like. I'm going to get rid of this put statement, and we'll grab the params. Params is going to be a hash. It's going to take a set of key value pairs. So the first thing it's going to take in is a subtotal. So I'll say params subtotal. And then it's going to take in a state name. And the state name is going to be params, and then you can call this state name. It's completely up to you. These names here, then I'm kind of going back to the section where we talked about how you can work with key value pairs inside of methods or method arguments. So these key names here are what we're going to have to pass when we call the call method now. So what I can do is I can get whatever the tax amount is going to be. So the tax amount is going to equal the subtotal times the tax rate. Now the way we call this tax rate method here on line 21 is we're going to call self.taxRate, and then we're going to pass in that state name, and then that is going to call that method for us. Now, the reason why we have to call self here is because that is how we can access the tax rate method while inside of the module. Because remember, we are not creating that same class-based instance that we did, say, up here on line 11. So we are using a different syntax. We're using modules with a nested class. And so here, if we want to call the tax rate method, we need to use the word self. We're saying that I am referring to this specific instance of the form builder class module. So now that we have all of that, now we can generate our total. So we're going to return the subtotal plus the tax amount. Okay, let's see if all of this is working. So I'm going to first wrap up some form data here. So we'll say this is going to be the form data that was sent from our form. It's going to be a key value pair of subtotal, which we'll say it's 5.5, and then the state name, we'll start off with that being in Arizona. And that is going to be our hash of key value pairs. And now, let me give us a little bit of room here. And now in this call method, now we're going to pass in the form data. So if this all works, this should give us our subtotal plus whatever the tax amount is. So let's see if this is working. I'm going to run this code. And looks like we have a little bit of an issue. No undefined method call for sale. So let's go up in my syntax and let's see what I did wrong. Oh, and this is I'm actually glad I left this error in here, because this is something I have done before, which means you might also do this. Notice here how I have this self.call method. This is left over from how we previously made this. Because I'm saying class and then I'm passing in these double angle brackets with self, I no longer have to say def self.call. This is doing that work for us. So that is why we got that error. Okay, now let's run it. There we go. And let's see, that all worked. So now it is returning 5.8575. Perfect. Now let's change this state name to California. Let's see if this works. This should be something like 5.9 something now. So now if I run this code, I run it, and there we go. That is all changing. So look at this. We actually have built out a pretty complex type of module right here. We have the kind of the foundation for an entire way of taking in form data, performing all kinds of different calculations, and then returning a total amount. This actually mimics exactly something that I've built out here. Notice here I have the sale manager system, and then I have a sale builder service. Now the sale builder service here, there we go. This has a lot of behavior. So this has, as you can see, it has a nested module setup. Then I'm performing the same kind of process where I'm passing in self directly to the class. So I'm kind of instantly instantiating this class. And then I created a run method. This is the same as our call method. I'm taking in some data parameters. And then from there, I'm running a lot of different processes. So here I'm calling self.attemptSale. This is a method, and I can look down and get it for you. Attempt, where is that? Here we go. It's on line 94. So this is a method that takes in some data, and then it performs all kinds of different calculations, and it's calling other methods inside of here. So as you can see, this is a much more built out, but it's the same exact example that we have here. We're taking in form data, we have a nested module setup, and then we are calling that all on one line. So what's so cool about this, and this is something that hopefully you really like, because if you're building out very large applications, this is going to be something that could be your best friend. Because imagine you have a scenario, if you have a little bit of Rails expertise, this will make sense. Imagine you have a scenario where you have a controller action, much like this, like taking in sale data from an e-commerce website. And you have one endpoint that gets hit, but you have all kinds of different data that needs to be processed. You might need to calculate tip amounts, tax rates. You may need to bring in coupon codes, all kinds of different things like that. You wouldn't want to put all of that data directly in the controller action. Instead, what's so nice about this is instead of having to put all that data in a controller and making the code look really messy and hard to manage, you can actually call this one line of code. You can pass in all the data directly into that one line, and then in that other file, you can manage all of those processes. You can calculate your tax rates, you can do your tip amounts, you can do all of those things, and you can have it organized really well. And that's really where modules come in and are so handy. In addition to that, it also gives you the ability to abstract out certain processes so that they can be shared throughout the rest of the application. So say that you have multiple parts of your app that need to call this sale builder module. You can now do that. You don't have to copy all of the code from one part of the application to another anytime that you want to calculate the tax rate, for example. You can create a dedicated module and then call that module or even nested module anywhere else in the application. So hopefully this helps. This is a comprehensive guide for understanding how to work with modules, nested modules, and even how to combine modules with classes.